Um, as Pete said, my name's Ben Miller. I'm currently working for Dassault Aircraft Services. It's a subsidiary of Dassault Aviation, which is a French airplane manufacturer. Um, Business jets, mid to large business jets. So Pete asked me to kind of go through how I got to where I am, career path, I suppose, or career journey. And it really, I can't remember why, but I always loved to travel. And so in the early 2000s, I decided to get my pilot's license. I didn't work in aviation at all, and I didn't really have any desire to work in aviation. I just wanted to fly. And I did that, and then that was about 2002, just because it seemed like something interesting to do, and I did that, and then I kind of forgot about aviation for a while. And I'd always worked in construction, and I worked in construction while I was going to college, and worked through the mid 2000s in the construction industry, residential construction here in Nevada. And about 2006, 2007, things started really slowing down. And by 2008, it was pretty brutal in the industry. We had job sites where they would walk out and lay off 5,000 people in one day. Huge projects just fell through, and it was just kind of I lost faith in construction, the construction industry, and I also didn't really see a future in Reno. I was born and raised here in Reno, and I always wanted to live here, but the economy just, it fell through the floor. But there was one bright spot in Reno, Nevada in 2009. Dassault Aviation opened a maintenance facility to service their Falcon aircraft in Reno. And it caught my eye because I think it was the only business that moved in to town between 2009 and 2012. And it, previous flight training experience combined with I had in working construction, I had helped a guy build his house, and he was a pilot. And pilots love to talk. A million stories. He started out in Vietnam and had worked for some of the larger U.S. carriers, and then had worked for Singapore Airlines and been to Iran, I think, before the before the whole hostage situation. And he had a million stories, and we would talk, and I would tell him about aviation. And he was just a cool guy. He had his own plane. And anyway, I kind of thought about it, and I thought, well, construction's going nowhere. I eventually ended up as an apartment maintenance manager, and it was rough. I was making about $15 an hour doing that, and I had guys. I would post a position for a maintenance supervisor or maintenance technician for apartment maintenance, paying $10 an hour, and I'd have 2,000 applicants a day for that job. I just didn't see a future in it. So I decided to at that point to retrain, and using my kind of broad skills with tools and just working with my hands, decided that an A&P mechanic would be the way to go. And the best way to do that would be to go to school. I had saved up money, and I had, like $35,000 in the bank or something. I'd sold my house as well before everything fell through. I sold my house by the skin of my teeth and had a couple dollars from that, and decided that the only way I was going to afford to go to school was to go to a public college. And so I moved to California and got residency, and then enrolled at San Diego Miramar College, their A&P program, or aircraft maintenance technician program there. So it's a great school, has great instructors. San Diego had a fantastic, still has a fantastic aviation foundation. Some of the earliest flyers flew out of San Diego for the Navy. They have a great air and space museum down there. And of course, the military has a huge presence. And they fly everybody from the Navy to the Marines, to the National Guard. It's a great place if you ever want to go plane spotting. You can see, you see a lot of stuff down there. So I committed fully to that, quit my job, moved to San Diego, and started school there. I believe it was the fall of 2011. I started school there. I had a newborn daughter, and so it was good timing. I got assistance through Pell Grants, and that helped a little bit with tuition, and my savings lasted me through graduating from their program. And I graduated with zero debt, which was really very, very nice. But that was an excellent program. I really enjoyed A&P school. The breadth of the subjects that were covered, the variety of things you worked on everything from piston powered aircraft to jet engines, everything from opposed piston power to radial engines. We have those big old Warbird engines, work on those, and helicopters, airplanes, you name it, you got your hands on it. It wasn't always the best equipment, but you got a good, strong background in a variety of things in A&P school, and you'll get that from any A&P school in the country. So I had, originally it was about a 3-year program to work your way through the program. I decided that I wanted to get done in 2 years, so I did, morning and night classes. I was there all day, every day, and in order to save money at school, we decided that Tijuana, Mexico would be the place to do it. So we moved down to Tijuana and rented a little apartment there, and I commuted every day up on a motorcycle up to Miramar. It was fun times. Made a lot of good friends at school. And in 2012, I think it was in January of 2012, I sat for the AP exams, passed them, both the oral and the practical, and that was it. School was over, time to go find a job. While in A&P school, I had worked a couple of different places. The first place I worked was, it was called the Flying Leathernecks Aviation Museum at Miramar Air Force Base, or not, sorry, Miramar, what is it? It's a Marine base there in San Diego. Anyway, they have a small museum, some really cool old aircraft. They have the old Mitchells from the World War II, Corsairs, and helicopters from Iraq, the first Iraq War. Anyway, that was the first time I really worked on aircraft, and I tell you, I'm glad that they were not airworthy at all, because you learn to buck rivets, you learn to change tires and do all kinds of stuff, and it's the perfect place to learn, because those things are static, they're never going to fly again. And so the safety element, it eases your mind a little bit, but you got your hands on all kinds of tools, and you worked on some, really cool stuff. And there was always guys there, retired old guys, some of them may have flown those things in the war for all I know. They're, and you'd ask them a million questions. What's this? Why? What's going on here? Tons of knowledge there. I would recommend anybody, if you live near an aviation museum and you really want some experience, hands-on experience, go down there, check it out. They'll be glad to have you, and you can, you know, you can go at it. They'll let you, no license, no prerequisites required. You just go for it. So that was good. And then eventually, the last semester I was in school, I had a paid job. I worked for the Flying Leathernecks as a volunteer. I had a paid job. There was a young IA, which is an inspection authorization. It's a license, a step above an A&P, which A&P is airframe power plant license. Anyway, he was a young IA. He was 28 years old, and he seemed to have everything really together. He had a thriving, looked like a thriving business where he was doing some smaller checks on business jets, mostly out of Mexico. And he needed guys. And so he hired, I think, about 4 or 5 of us that were in our last semester A&P school. And we got our hands on, real airworthy aircraft, and kind of got introduced to, some of the regulations that follow inspections, and also, just working on the real thing. And so I did that for my last semester there. Kind of ended a little strangely, because he, make sure I'm not going over time on this one. The owner, who I thought had everything together, he had a house on out on the Strand there, and a fishing boat and everything. Well, it turns out he was also on the side, what do we call it? Transporting illegal drugs, basically. And so one day we showed up at the hangar, and it was all locked down, and the FBI was there and everything. And they let us in, and we got our tools and everything. But it turned out, yeah, he wasn't making it all in aviation. He was had some side businesses. So anyway, that all shut down, and finished school, like I said, in 2012. And my wife is from South America, and she wanted to go back, and we wanted to have another kid, and she wanted to have her family close. So I went down to South America, and I started working for a company it was a Spanish company from Spain. They specialize in forest firefighting, and they operated some Agusta helicopters and air tractors, and some Camov helicopters. And anyway, so I went to work for them. I went to work as a base mechanic. So they basically just flew me out to the forest and dropped me off with a toolbox and said, "Here's your helicopter, keep it going through the season." And so I tried my best to work in the situation under the circumstances. But being so new, honestly, and I went down there, and they thought I knew what was going on because I had my A&P license. And I found out real quick that I didn't. I was not in any shape to be out there by myself taking care of an aircraft. There was a strong learning curve coming out of A&P school and into my first job. But I managed to do that for 2 years. The company was called FASA Aviation out of Cordoba, Spain. And their business plan model was they worked the fire season in South America. And then when that season, when it dried up or got cold and started raining in about May, we would pack up the helicopters and put them on cargo ships and ship them to either through the Panama Canal or around the Horn to Spain. And then we would do fire season there. So it was a perpetual fire season. It was long hours. we were declared emergency personnel. So I was 24 hours on base. I was supposed to be there for, I think my schedule was 19 days on, seven days off or something like that. But routinely there wouldn't be a replacement. They wouldn't show up. And so I think the record was I was 52 days on without relief on at base. So yeah, and it didn't pay very much because it was in South America, and it was dangerous. There's some conflicts down there between the indigenous people and the forest landowners. So they were often the indigenous people down there would often set the fires and then ambush us. And so we would check the aircraft for bullet holes when it came back, and got a couple, but they weren't very good shots, I suppose. Not at the beginning, at least. They got better. And sometimes they would sneak onto the different bases at night and firebomb the helicopters. We lost a couple that way. And so it was pretty dangerous. It was, I lived with the fire crew, and that was another thing that I really struggled with was, I'd count the guys when they came back, count them when they got off the helicopter. And it was sometimes you'd have two less guys come back, and it got tough. So I decided, okay, South America, it was fun for a little bit, but it's a little wild for me. And I started applying for jobs in the US, coming back to the US, and it was a little bit difficult. I was down there for about 3 years, and all of my aviation experience, and the majority of it was really unverifiable for employees in the United States, because I had worked for a Spanish company in Chile, and people just, everything was still a little bit slow, and the resumes started not making it as far as I wanted them to, the applications and things. And so I ended up taking a job, a seasonal job in Juneau, Alaska, working basically doing paperwork. I would do weight and balance, passenger manifest, sales, flight tracking, all kinds of things for it was a helicopter tour company, and they would fly from Juneau up to the glaciers, and they had a dog sled camp up there, and the cruise ships would come into Juneau, and the guys, everybody wants to experience Alaska, so we would sell them tours on these helicopters for, I don't know, like $200 or $300 or something, and we'd fly them up to a glacier where we had a dog sled camp, and they'd ride the dog sled around, and so I didn't do any maintenance in Juneau, but I made a lot of contacts. And while I was there, I decided, I have an A&P, and that's just not enough. And I need to get something more firm on my resume. And I had worked with the Augusta 119 helicopters in Chile. And so I paid for my own school for Augusta 119 maintenance school. I flew to Philadelphia. I think it was expensive. It was like $12,000. But that investment paid off, because when the season ended in Juneau, I got a job with Life Flight Network they're based out of the Pacific Northwest. They're in Aurora, Oregon. And that was perfect for me. I loved the aircraft. I worked with the Pilatus PC-12 and the Augusta. They're one of the few medical operators for EMS helicopters for Augustas. And so I got a job with them. They put me out in a base again in Washington State, and I loved it. It was good paying. I loved the mission. Helping people that were in need, and I love the teamwork of working with nurses, pilots, other mechanics, and it was a great job. But of all things, my dad got sick, and he was still here in Reno, and I was working 7 days on, 7 days off, and commuting back to Reno, and decided that I need to be back here in Reno to help him. So I applied at Dassault Aircraft Services. I had a connection where one of the guys I worked with in Washington knew the general manager, and I called him up and I said, "Hey, do you know Nick Fiorenza?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, hey, he said you guys might be looking for somebody down there in Reno." And right in the door, started out as a mechanic, worked there 2.5 years as a mechanic, and then I switched over to planning, which is it's a little bit harder. It's a little bit more abstract than being a mechanic. Uh, Basically, right now I've been in planning for a little over 2 years, and I just, as a mechanic, I would always get mad, like, "Hey, why don't I have this thing that I need? Why don't I have this seal? Why don't I have this part that I need to get this aircraft going up? Somebody knew about this 2 weeks ago. Why isn't it here?" And those that kind of thought process led me to getting into planning. And so now I essentially prepare everything that's needed for the mechanics to be able to do their job on some of these big, some of these projects are 5,000 man hours. They involve thousands of parts, engineering, different agencies. It all needs a ton of legwork up front. So that's what I'm doing right now. I've been doing it for about 2 years, and that's kind of how I ended up here. I would have never thought any of that would have happened when I left A&P school, but that's where I came from, and that's where I'm at right now.
Wow, it's quite the story. Thanks, Ben. You enjoying your job now?
Yeah, I underestimated the amount of stress. If I miss something, it's not we'll get it tomorrow or whatever. Some of these, if I forget to order a part or don't get engineering done on something, it can really affect 40 or 50 mechanics can be left with their hands up. They can't go. And so it definitely it's a different kind of stress. With helicopters, I used to wake up in the middle of the night and think, "Oh man, did I safety that, or did I torque that down right?" And I was really, really stressed out about the safety of the flight. Now I wake up at night thinking, "Oh man, are these guys going to have what they need to do the job?" It's there's no escaping it.
That's awesome. Does anybody else have a question?
I actually have a question.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ben, it's funny because I know you mentioned you paid for your own training there for the Augusta, and a lot of guys in aviation, from guys I've talked to in aviation, they always tell me that the pay to play never pans out for anybody. Do you think that contrary to that?
Yeah, I do. I wouldn't recommend it, and the employee, or sorry, the employer should be paying that. With Dassault, they sent me to Falcon 2000 school, Falcon 900 school, Pratt and Whitney school. And those are, but at the time, and the way the job market was at the time, I needed to make money, and I was just not getting the higher paying jobs. And so an upfront investment of $12,000 netted me, I tripled my pay essentially. So you shouldn't have to, but it's a good way to get your foot in the door. You can have a lot of, like I said, an AP is kind of an abstract thing, but hard skills and a technical background are worth a lot in this industry.
Thank you.
Joe, did you have something, buddy?
No, I really liked your video today. It was pretty good.
Well, we're talking to Ben. Do you have a question for Ben?
Yeah, I do, Ben. Great story. I wanted to ask you, where you're working now, what is the progression of jobs? If one of our job seekers are looking for an A and P position, how many of those people get to move up? And is it just the IA position or is it management? What is the progression, say, at Dassault?
So at Dassault, I'd say the lowest, we actually right now, it's no secret that mechanics are hard to come by these days. And we've started a program where we take people that are mechanically adept, and we'll actually train them up to the point and get them the experience they need to get an A&P. We have a couple of motorcycle mechanic, a former motorcycle mechanic, and a former diesel mechanic, who are some of our best performers. And so that would be the lowest. And a lot of guys come in with an A&P, usually with a little bit of experience with Falcons or in business jets. And typically what happens is you'll work until you're proficient and you're good at your job. And then we organize into crews, and each crew handles usually one or two jobs at a time. And within that crew, you have a crew chief and a lead. So the progression would be A&P. You go in and then once you're really good to be a lead, and a lead will instruct others how to do things, and then a crew chief actually takes responsibility for the job, runs it. And then further, that's kind of as far as mechanics on the floor, on the production floor, in the hangar, that's the crew chief is about where you top out. And I say that, but that's good. A crew chief is a good job. A lot of ours make more than anybody else in the building, because they're still hourly employees. They get good overtime, they get good pay, and it's a 100,000 plus job for those crew chiefs. And beyond that, there's planning, like I've done, customer project managers who oversee the financials and really lead the crew chiefs. And even our general manager is a former mechanic. So there's no limit. The progression can take you wherever you want to go. We have mechanics that are in sales positions. We have mechanics. The advantage you're going to have is you're going to know the industry. You're going to know what's going on, and that gives you a real leg up versus somebody who comes from a different, say from an auto parts store or something like that.
Mhm. Thank you.
Hey, Ben, are you guys hiring? And it doesn't have to be just for Reno. It could be throughout the country. But are you guys looking to fill positions right now?
Yeah, I know that we're looking for another planning position. We're always looking for mechanics, and that's in Reno. We have some mobile teams that are looking for people. Yes, we're always hiring, is what it comes down to. And that's at Reno, Little Rock, Arkansas, and Wilmington, Delaware, are three major service centers here in the United States.
Kind of to piggyback off what you were talking about in response to Joe's question, does Dassault do like a sponsorship program where they'll take somebody from 0 hours as a mechanic and put them through their program and get them through their A&P and then all the way up into actually working for Dassault as a mechanic?
Yeah, no, you'll start out day one working for Dassault as a mechanic. You just won't be able to sign off your work, but yes, they will take you. Really, you need some kind of mechanical ability, but yeah, they'll take you having no A&P, never been in aviation, don't know what an airplane is, and they'll take you, and if you're the right fit, they'll put you in the program. They'll get you your A&P.
Awesome. Thank you.
While you work.
Cool.
Any other questions? Go for it, Dawson. Anybody else have a question?
Okay. Juan, is it working now?
Yep, you're all set.
I just wanted to check because I had tried to, because I hear conflicting things about like if you want to become a pilot, you know, you can work your way up from engineer. But I've also heard the opposite saying like, oh yeah, you know, that's not how it's done anymore. So I was just wondering if you have any knowledge about that, know anyone who went through that.
Are you talking like a flight engineer?
Like just in like basically like getting like working up from like ground crew, working on airplanes and such, being able to get to becoming a pilot, if that's like still a trend that people follow.
No, there are a number of pilots. It really goes both ways. You see pilots become AMPs, and you see AMPs become pilots. I don't know. I don't honestly know how much being a pilot is, or sorry, being an AMP is worth to being a pilot. The other way, being a pilot's worth a lot if you have your AMP to be an AMP. But you know, a lot of our field tech reps are former pilots. But I don't know what it's worth, to be honest. But there are many pilots who have AMPs as well.
All right.
I assume you were saying engineering as so engineering is kind of it's a funny word that it changes, has different meanings over the world, across the world. That in YASA, which is like the FAA of Europe, an engineer is an AMP mechanic. They're technically classified as engineers, and that's what I assumed you're talking about. There's also flight engineers that work in older aircraft that actually control the engines on the aircraft. I believe, I think even some of the 747 cargos and the C-130s in the military still employ flight engineers that they sit in the third seat behind the pilot and co-pilot, and they run the engines for the pilot. And then there's engineers like aerospace engineers that are in the U.S. So I'm not really, which engineer are we talking about here?
I was thinking like so aerospace engineer, because like that
Okay.
one is kind of, I don't know, it just seems like a bit of a loose one, but like the one I was thinking in particular probably doesn't pertain, but like sort of more in the research and development work side of
Yeah.
it. You probably, I don't know if you would.
I know that it's valuable to be like a test pilot. That's the only place I've seen engineers become pilots, to be honest.
All right.
It's rare. It's very rare. I think because
Okay.
engineering is so specialized, and I don't. But yeah, I've never seen it outside of test pilots.
Okay. All right.
Dawson, if I can give you any input, just based on what you've been asking, it sounds to me like you're an engineering student. Well, I was an engineering student too, and at some point I realized flying's a lot more fun, so I dropped out of engineering school, and now I'm a flight instructor. So if that's your situation, just based on my experience, that's definitely an avenue to look at.
Right, because like I did back in 2018, I did went up to a flight academy in Oklahoma, got up to a solo flight. So like I know piloting something I do enjoy, but like from a lot of what I've talked to people about, that like just in terms of getting there, because like I'm still looking to do like inventing like research design stuff like for engineering, and I was just thinking like, hey, might as well with that kind of crossover, you might be able to apply some of that to piloting and vice versa. So I'm just wondering like that stuff for in terms of a career, like finding those opportunities and the best way to get about that.
Yeah, I don't know. I know a lot of engineers that became lawyers, but very few that became pilots.
All right.
These are great questions. So thank you very much. Unless there's another question, Ben, I want to thank you for coming on today and sharing your story and what you're doing now. It was totally informative. I learned that AMP probably isn't for me, so that you won't see me in the shop over at Dassault, but maybe I can hang out with you in the main office. But thank you very much for coming on today. And you have any lasting parting comments?
No, just aviation is it's an industry that has it's got a lot of depth, and you can go a lot of different ways. Anywhere I'm in business aviation right now, but in the near future, I wouldn't mind getting into something that's a little more environmentally acceptable. And there's plenty of it. There's plenty of great things going on in aviation. Everything from startups to what's going on with SpaceX and the aerospace industry. It's a great industry to be in, and really, I mean, it's a lifelong industry. Very few people get deep into aviation and then exit. That's just the way it is.